Okay, let's go on to some drug toxicology. A little bit of time here. Your absorption can be oral, inhalation, IV, intranasal, snuffling, transdermal. This is big with fentanyl. What is Duragesic, I think, is the trade name. People are abusing this. Fentanyl, or this Duragesic, is extremely dangerous, folks. And I'm just telling you this if you have friends or relatives that may be prescribed this drug. It's usually a patch. Sometimes they put it on their back. This drug has an extremely low, what we call therapeutic index. Therapeutic index is how much of it do you have to take to get toxic effects as it relates to how much to just get the therapeutic effects. For example, ibuprofen has a huge therapeutic index. You can take probably 20, 30 times the recommended dose without really experiencing any bad symptoms. If you just take double the dose on this, you could die. It has a very low therapeutic index. It's that fentanyl, that Duragesic. In fact, the manufacturer says don't even use a heat pad with this stuff because the heat accelerates this transdermal absorption, and you can end up with too much too soon and have toxic effects. The whole trick is crossing this blood-brain barrier, which is why crack is so much more addictive than cocaine hydrochloride, because crack crosses that barrier like that. It is instantaneous, and the reinforcement is so much stronger. Cocaine hydrochloride, the body's got to break off that hydrochloride. It takes a little while. It's got to go through the bloodstream, and then it eventually gets to the brain. Crack, not so much. It's right there. So the drug's obviously got to be absorbed in order to exert effect, and it's got to get to the appropriate receptors. Sometimes that absorption is dictated by the chemical properties of the drug. Distribution is how it gets out to the receptors in the body. Generally speaking, if it's hydrophilic, it gets carried into body water, which is going to include blood. But hydrophobic drugs, and there's not that many of them, gets absorbed into fats and tissues. THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. It is distributed hydrophobically into fats. That becomes important for individuals who are losing a lot of weight. If you are losing a lot of weight and you've been a chronic, and I mean big-time chronic abuser of marijuana for a long period of time, you can have so much THC stored in fat getting back released into your system that your urine can become positive for THC metabolite, even though you haven't consumed in months or a month or more. Half-life is how long it takes to get rid of half of a dose. And by the way, this THC positive fat loss thing, it's not a very credible defense, because our laboratory, most laboratories, test urine at such a level that it precludes the possibility of this slow leaching of reagent. If we have a THC positive, it's pretty sure that it's indicative of use within the previous 36 hours of the sample. The amount taken to remove half of the concentration of the drug is half-life. Hydrophilic substances are excreted quickly. Why? Your water is mostly urine, and that's how your body likes to get rid of stuff. It's the easiest way. Metabolism, which means changing a drug, can go from active to inactive. THC is active. The metabolite, THC acid, is not. It's hard to test for THC. It's easy to test for THC acid. Cocaine is active in your body. Its primary metabolite, benzoylecgonine, is not. But it can go the other way. If you're taking codeine for pain, You get some of the effect from codeine, but it actually breaks down so quickly that really what you're taking is morphine. It's primary metabolite. Carisoprotyl, or soma, is broken down to mepibramate. The parent drug actually has very little activity. It's the metabolite that exerts the effect on the body. Elimination is a process of removing it, and that usually means making it more polar, more like water, and more water soluble. You have zero-order kinetics, which we discussed with alcohol. That's why we can do back extrapolation. It's a consistent elimination rate. And then we have first-order kinetics, which is not a linear process. It uses half-lives. It's an exponential thing. Even the math is more complicated, but it becomes even more complicated. This is a very simple representation of zero-order kinetics, where this is a straight line. If you know what it is here, you can predict what it's going to be there. First-order kinetics, well, it kind of depends. If you're here, it's hard to predict here. You don't know when this inflection takes place, so on and so forth. The best analogy I read about it is that if you had a friend in a tree with a baseball and or a maple leaf, and with enough practice, you could have your friend drop the baseball, and you could be blindfolded and predict when it's going to hit the ground, because it's consistent. Okay, it's consistent. But if your friend were dropping a maple leaf, blindfolded, you could never predict, because it's going to sway in the breeze, and sometimes the breeze will catch it more, and sometimes it'll go this way and that way. It's generally impossible to predict something like that, or to back extrapolate. Sometimes the effect of a drug is dependent on where it's at. Is it being eliminated? Is it being absorbed? What concentration is? Good example is alcohol experiences hysteresis. It's a known depressant. We know it's a depressant. That's the way it's classified pharmacologically. In the absorption phase, it can have an excitatory effect. Everybody's fun, having a good time. That's why most people drink at a social level. But later on, you got the guy who's asleep at the bar. Okay? It has its depressant effect. Methamphetamine can do the same thing. It's euphoric. You can have this excited state, but then later you have this crash. This is taken directly from a really good resource, Drug Toxicology for Prosecutors. I know you guys have access to it. Please don't ask your toxicologist to try to predict what a previous drug concentration might have been, because it can't be done. There's no relationship between drug concentration in blood and corresponding level of driving impairment. I'm going to say it again. No correlation between drug concentration in blood and level of driving impairment. You've got tolerance, individual pharmacodynamic response. So why do we even do the testing? Usually what we can do is support the testimony of the officer who made the arrest. We can describe what the drug is, what its pharmacological effects would be, what we would expect to see in an individual, but we can never say that this defendant was or was not impaired at a given point in time. We say this drug is impairing. We found it in their system, but we can't say anything about that individual at that point in time.